It is 4:30 in the morning in Williston, North Dakota. The wind chill is sitting at 22 below zero, and a trucker named Dale is standing in a frozen truck stop parking lot, staring at a Webasto auxiliary heater that will not fire. The display blinks an error code. The battery is struggling. The diesel in his tank is thickening by the minute. But plugged into the pedestal hookup 2 spots over, another big rig is already warm. The engine block is hot to the touch. Coolant is circulating. That truck has a 600-watt block heater and a 30-foot orange extension cord, and it started on the first crank. For decades, the block heater was the standard. Every diesel truck that ran freight through the coal belt, from Montana to Minnesota to Maine, had one installed from the factory. It was a simple, resistive heating element threaded into the engine block, wired to a standard household plug, and connected to any 110-volt outlet. Typically rated between 600 and 1500 watts, depending on engine displacement. You plugged in at night. The heater warmed your coolant slowly and steadily over 4 to 6 hours. By morning, your engine turned over like it was parked in a heated garage. No drama, no diagnostics, just warm metal and oil that actually flowed the way oil is supposed to flow. Glow plugs handled the combustion side, heating the cylinders enough to ignite cold fuel. The block heater handled the thermal mass of the engine itself, the block, the coolant jacket, and, by conduction, the oil in the pan. Together, they made cold starting a diesel in January about as routine as cold starting one in April. Truckers understood the system because there was almost nothing to understand. Plug in, wait, unplug, start. Then the industry moved on. Webasto and Espar, 2 European manufacturers, introduced diesel-fired auxiliary heaters in the 1990s and early 2000s. These units burned a small amount of diesel fuel from the truck's own tank to warm the cab and sometimes the engine. They worked independently. No outlet needed. No extension cord. Fleets loved them because they could keep a sleeper cab warm during mandatory rest periods without idling the main engine. Anti-idling laws in states like California and New York made the case stronger. The auxiliary heater became the modern solution. But there was a trade-off that nobody talked about in the sales brochures. These systems are electronic. They require fuel delivery, a functioning glow plug, a working control module, a healthy battery, and clean exhaust flow to operate. That is 5 points of failure on a machine designed to work when everything else is frozen solid. The block heater, by comparison, has one moving part. None, actually. It is a resistive coil. Electricity goes in, heat comes out. There is nothing to fail except the cord itself. And failure is exactly what started happening. Go talk to any owner-operator who runs freight through North Dakota in January. Ask them about their Webasto. You will hear the same story repeated in slightly different words. The unit throws a fault code at the worst possible time. The fuel line to the heater gels because the small diameter tubing is more vulnerable to cold than the main fuel system. The battery, already weakened by sub-zero temperatures, cannot supply enough power to ignite the heater's glow plug. Cold cranking amps on a standard truck battery can drop by 40% or more when the temperature falls below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. The heater needs power to run, but the cold is draining the very battery that feeds it. It is a losing equation. Espar units have the same weaknesses. Different brand, same physics. These heaters pull fuel through narrow lines, ignite it in a small combustion chamber, and push warm air or warm coolant through the system. When everything works, they are elegant. But 20 below zero is not a place for elegance. It is a place for blunt force reliability. And then there's the fuel itself. Standard number 2 diesel begins to cloud and gel at temperatures below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Winter blended number 2 diesel and straight number 1 diesel resist gelling at lower temperatures. But not every fuel stop sells a proper winter blend. Not every trucker gets to choose where they fuel up. Dispatch sends you where the load goes. And sometimes that means filling up at a station that sold you summer-grade fuel in November. When that fuel gels, the auxiliary heater starves. It cannot burn what it cannot flow. The block heater does not care about your fuel. It does not care about your battery's cold cranking amps. It does not draw from the truck's electrical system while the engine is off. It pulls power from the wall. A 15-amp outlet and a heavy gauge extension cord. That is the entire supply chain. If you have been paying attention to what is happening in the cold belt, this is exactly why truckers are circling back to the old technology. And if this kind of real-world trucking content is what keeps you watching, subscribe to Key Soup. We cover the trucks, the engineering, and the people who keep this industry running. Now here is where the story gets specific. Let us talk about a morning in February. A fleet of 6 trucks is parked overnight at a truck stop outside Fargo. 4 of them are running Webasto or SBAR systems. 2 have factory block heaters plugged into pedestal hookups. The temperature drops to 24 below overnight with wind. By 5 in the morning, 2 of the 4 auxiliary heated trucks will not start. One has a fault code on the Webasto control module. The other has a gelled fuel line feeding the SBAR. Both truckers are now calling for service in a parking lot where the wrench freezes to the bolt before you can turn it. The repair window, if a mobile tech can even reach them, is measured in hours. Every hour is a missed delivery window. Every missed window is money lost. The 2 trucks with block heaters, they unplug, coil the cord, and roll out on schedule. The coolant is warm. The oil is more fluid. The engine turns over without hesitation. There is no control module to diagnose, no small fuel line to thaw, no glow plug to replace. The block heater did its one job, and it did it the same way it has done it since the 1940s. This is not a hypothetical. This is a Tuesday in the Dakotas. This is a Wednesday in northern Minnesota. This is Thursday in Fairbanks. Every trucker who has spent a winter in the cold belt has a version of this story, and every version ends the same way. The complicated system failed. The simple one did not. What is happening now, in 2025 and into 2026, is a quiet return to basics. Cummins diesel engines, the kind used in Ram 2500 and 3500 pickups, still have factory block heater provisions. They never removed them. Ford Powerstroke engines and GM Duramax engines also support factory-installed block heaters. The infrastructure was never actually abandoned. It was just ignored in favor of something that looked better on a spec sheet. Fleets that run the Northern Corridor are reinstalling block heaters on trucks that had them disconnected or bypassed. Owner-operators are buying aftermarket block heaters rated at 750 to 1500 watts and having them threaded into their engines. The parts cost under $100 in most cases. Installation is a few hours. And the orange extension cord, the one that coils in the toolbox or hangs off the bumper, has become something close to a badge of honor. There is a reason you see those cords everywhere in truck stop parking lots above the 45th parallel. They are not a sign of old technology. They are a sign of experience. A trucker who plugs in at night is a trucker who has been burned before. Who has stood in the dark at 4 in the morning with a heater that will not fire and a load that will not wait? The cord is a statement. It says you have done this long enough to know what actually works when the wind is howling and the thermometer reads -20. Walk through a truck stop in Minot or Duluth on a January night and count the orange cords snaking across the pavement. That is not a failure of progress. That is an industry correcting course. Truck stops across the cold belt still provide electric pedestal hookups for exactly this purpose. In North Dakota, Montana, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, these hookups are as standard as the diesel pumps. Some charge a small fee. Some include it in the overnight parking rate. Either way, the infrastructure has always been there because the need never actually went away. The industry just pretended it did for a while. There is also an engineering argument worth making here. A cold start on a diesel engine without any preheating is brutal on internal components. Metal contracts in extreme cold. Oil thickens to the consistency of honey. Clearances tighten. When you crank a frozen diesel, the starter motor is fighting against all of that resistance. The first few seconds of operation, before oil pressure builds and warmth spreads through the block, account for a disproportionate amount of total engine wear over the life of the truck. A block heater that has been plugged in for 4 to 6 hours brings the coolant temperature up to the point where the engine thinks it is sitting in moderate weather. Oil flows, metal expands to proper tolerances. The starter barely has to work. The engine fires clean. That is not nostalgia talking. That is metallurgy. Now comes the real question. Will manufacturers go back to emphasizing block heaters over auxiliary systems? The honest answer is probably not. Webasto and Espar sell expensive units with high margins. Anti-idling regulations keep creating demand for systems that can heat a sleeper cab without running the main engine. A block heater warms the engine, but it does not heat the cab. For over-the-road truckers sleeping in their rigs, you still need something for cabin comfort. But what the cold belt has proven, winter after winter, is that the auxiliary heater should not be the only option. It should be a complement, not a replacement. The smart setup in 2026 is both: an auxiliary heater for the cab and a block heater for the engine. The auxiliary system handles comfort. The block heater handles the thing that actually matters when the temperature drops past 20 below: whether the truck starts. Some owner-operators have figured this out on their own and run both systems. They let the Webasto keep the sleeper warm for rest periods, but when it is time to roll, they trust the block heater for the engine. It is a redundancy that costs almost nothing compared to the alternative. And in the cold belt, redundancy is not paranoia. It is planning. The problem is that fleets buying new trucks often skip the block heater option to save $40 or $50 per unit. Multiply that across 1,000 trucks, and the savings look good on a spreadsheet. But one no-start event in January costs more than every block heater in the fleet combined. A tow in sub-zero weather can run over $1,000. A missed delivery window can cost multiples of that. And the wear on an engine that cold, cranked without preheating? That cost shows up 100,000 miles later when the injectors fail early, or the bearings wear ahead of schedule. The math has always favored the block heater. The industry just forgot how to do the math. Here is what it comes down to. Every winter, there is a moment. You are parked overnight. The temperature is falling. The wind is picking up. You have a load that needs to move at dawn, and the only question that matters is whether your truck will start in the morning. The Webasto might start, the S-Bar might fire, if the fuel is right, if the battery holds, if the control module does not throw a code, if the glow plug is not worn, if the exhaust path is not blocked. If. Or you can walk to the pedestal, plug in your orange cord, and go to sleep, knowing that in 6 hours the block will be warm, the coolant will be circulating, and the engine will turn over like it is July. That orange extension cord is not old-fashioned. It is the most reliable piece of equipment in any trucker's winter kit. It has no software, no firmware updates, no fault codes, no fuel dependency. It does one thing, and it does it every single time. The cold belt already knows this. The rest of the industry is starting to remember. If this is the kind of content that respects what you actually deal with on the road, subscribe to Key Soup. We are here for the trucks, the engineering, and the people who make it all move.